not open. Do you want it? Will juice wake you up? I know what Angel is. He's probably in with his stuff.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Y'all all right?
Hanging in. Dr. Silver will be about a minute or two late. She is walking in the building.
Okay. Is that Christina?
It is. Did you get my text message?
I did. I'm more interested on where you at for vacation.
Where I was?
I said I'm more interested in where you at for vacation. Where'd you go?
San Diego, visit the stepdaughter and grandbaby.
Oh,
They
okay.
moved up
All
there.
right. All right.
So we finally got to see them. San Diego.
How's the weather out there?
Perfect. It really is. Actually, it was a bit too hot for considering San Diego, but it's starting to cool down, meaning 75, 80.
Oh yeah, wait till you come back
But
here.
I like the heat.
Oh yeah, no, wait till you come back here.
Mhm.
You're gonna love it. You're gonna love Connecticut right now. You're gonna love it. I got on a wool jacket.
I have my sweater packed because I anticipated.
For real.
Oh man.
All right, cool. Well, while we're waiting for Dr. Silver to officially start the meeting, if everyone could just introduce themselves and say something that they're excited about this fall, one thing that they're excited about this fall. And we'll start with Lori because she always seems to go last. What are you excited about? What gives you energy about the fall?
Good morning, everyone. This is my favorite time of year. So I love this time of year. Just apples, the pumpkins, good eats. It's just, I like it. And I'm happy with the warm weather, but I'm happy when it's over too, unlike Christina, I think. So I feel better this time of year.
I appreciate that. And that's pretty strange, but we'll take it.
Sorry. I'm born and raised in the Northeast, so.
Yeah. Miss Jax J001.
Good morning. Okay, so I'm Joanne Tremblay Jackson, the Director of Student Support Services, and I was asked to join this meeting, so here I am. And fall's okay, but I'm the kind of Canadian that moves south. All right, so I prefer warm weather. So even though I was French Canadian by heritage, I prefer warm weather. So the warm days of fall are wonderful. The real crispy fall days that are on the cool side, not so much. But I do like it cold when I'm sleeping at night. That's a good thing.
Yeah, true that. Yeah, you like to have your cake and eat it too. I
do if I can.
True that. Jahira, what gives you energy about fall, or what makes you excited about this thing we call fall?
Good morning, everyone. I mean, I like sleeping cold too, so that's the benefits. I don't have to use my AC and save on money. But what really, I love cooking. So for me, as soon as it reaches fall, I can start making my stews, some more soups without being judged. Because in the summer, if I do that, people think I'm crazy. So I'm actually in the process of getting everything ready to make a a beef stew later today. So yeah, cooking stews and soups and just sipping on some hot coffee or tea.
Okay, all right. You're an island girl. Yeah, my wife likes making all kind of soups and stews. She's from Tobago, and you know, soup just gives her energy. You know, that's just what she does. That's the go-to. Hoff J001.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
I'm
morning.
Jen Hoffman. Good morning, Senior Executive Director for Special Education and Pupil Services. It's great to see everyone. I am a lot like Lori. I just cannot deal with the super hot heat and humidity. So it's been nice the last few weeks.
Okay. All right. We got some strange ones on here. It's okay. It's okay. We got love for everybody. Mr. Walker, how about you, man? What's giving you energy, or you know, what's giving you life about this fall, this coming fall? What's making you excited about it?
I know I saw him, but I think we lost him. I'm sure he'll be back.
I'm sure he'll be back. All right. Francois. Are you there? All right. Well, we'll move on. All right. Dr. Silver, we're going to turn it into your hands. But before we do, if you could just tell us what's giving you life or giving you energy about this coming fall.
Good morning, everybody. You know, the people I work with, I so admire them. I know they work so hard, and that's what gives me energy, is knowing that I'm on a team that's working just as hard as I am. So thank you very much. Oh, and we have a pear tree in our yard. And so this fall, we have an abundance of pears and going to make a pear pie. So with a graham cracker crust and cream cheese also in the bottom. So I think that will be delicious. But I'm with Jahira. I love soups and stews. This time of year, the food is amazing. So thank you so much for that opportunity, Pastor Johnson. And I'm going to share my screen to bring us to the policy committee agenda or slide deck. And today we have a second reading for public comment, a second reading for district data dashboard, and a first reading for the use of physical force and physical restraint, seclusion, exclusionary timeouts, and also the use of exclusionary timeouts. And I'm just going to go to the next slide as we do our second reading for public comment and district data dashboard. There was a move in the language, and I don't know, Christina, if you have more, if there's more to this than what's right here, as I had to read.
Yeah. Sorry, I actually, sorry, I had that last on the agenda, but I was going to email you three while I was on this call. I do, just to clarify, technically it is not a second reading, as we have not had a first. It was only a discussion at the last policy committee. I have attached in board docs, and I'm going to send to Dr. Silver, Lori, and you, Chair AJ, my proposed changes on the language, but feel free to push that item to the end of the agenda if we have time for it. But I have attached it in board docs as well, just so you know.
Thank you, Christina. So Christina, would it go for a first reading, or would it not have a reading, just discussion?
Correct, just discussion so far. If the committee today agrees to move it for a first reading, then it will be for a first reading. Or if they feel it's not ready, then we will have more discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so by your leave, Pastor AJ, I will move to the next one, which is our district dashboard policy. And
Yes. It's Tyrone is not on, but we do have Jahira and Francois and myself. So we are all set to move forward.
all right, so I'm going to switch what I'm sharing.
I'm not sure. You seem a little distant from the microphone, or
Okay, I'll talk. Is this better?
does that sound better, folks?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So last time we met, we looked at and reviewed the redlining for this policy, and we had some discussion about whether or not to include all the indicators in the table in the policy. But there were quite a few updates because of the accountability system that the State Department brought in and the district strategic plan. So all of the indicators that would be listed under major and secondary goals would be a reflection of the refinements that our Board of Education has made with our strategic plan and the adoption of an accountability system by the State Department. And so I return this to your hands, Pastor AJ.
So just for clarity, this is a first reading, correct?
No, sir, this would be a second reading. It did go to the board for a first reading in our last meeting.
Understood. Okay. All right. Is there any recommended changes from the body? So we updated the state up to the state standards, correct?
State accountability, yes, sir.
Okay.
No questions on my end.
Francois, any questions on your side?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Great.
And good morning.
And good morning.
Yeah.
And I believe I saw Tyrone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, ma'am. My internet went down, so technology is good until it's not. But I don't have any questions. I too, AJ, understand that this is just aligning with the new state mandates. So I'm good with that.
Okay, we do have a decision point, if I may, Pastor AJ, with the language here. So I believe that it was the feeling of the board that the indicators would appear in the policy. So I'm going to delete that statement about approval of the policy committee so that the indicators do appear in the policy.
Okay.
And so our next step then is to bring the policy for a second reading to our Board of Education.
Okay, great. Yes. I think all of my committee members are okay with that. But also, would it be, Christina, if this for this second reading, in any other second reading on our agenda, if we can get it out like immediately after the meeting or when you get back, that will be great. Because I just want to make sure that everyone at least has it in their inboxes, so they're not just seeing it the first time at the board meeting. And I know that's not what we do, but I just want to make sure that we get it in their inboxes early enough, so they can take a look at it.
Understood. And also, just if anybody's watching on YouTube, it's also attached in board docs for any public who wants to view it. But I will make sure, in case there's any edits, to send it to the board members ASAP.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Silver. I think we're ready to move forward.
Thank you so much, sir. And so I will return to our slide deck and proceed to our first readings: use of physical force, restraint, seclusion, exclusionary timeout, and use of exclusionary timeout. So We have the policy here. The policy was adopted in 1999 and language revisions occurred in 2005. Since this time, the Connecticut law has evolved to address conditions pertaining to the use of physical restraint and or seclusion, required training and prevention training, use of exclusionary timeout in more detail in policy 5144.2, which is also a mandated policy, and the language in the policy has been revised to reflect current definitions and the appropriateness of specific strategies to ensure student safety. And I'm very appreciative to members of our team, student support team members who are here this morning. And here we go. So let me just stop sharing and share the policy screen. Okay, so we had, since 2005, we've had a number of, I think this one was 2005. This highlighting here that you see is, I'm not sure why it's there and I can't get rid of it, but in the final version, we will get rid of it. We'll fix it so it doesn't do that. But I'm going to show you the amazing work that this team has done to bring this policy into a more contemporary frame and to current, to align with current laws and regulations. And there is an introductory paragraph, but I'm not sure if this is, there we go, that's a little bit larger for you. The board acknowledges that behavior management practices for students may sometimes include the use of exclusionary timeout settings. A timeout setting is an area for a student to safely de-escalate, self-regulate, self-calm, regain control, and prepare to meet expectations to return to his or her educational program. A timeout setting shall only be used in conjunction with a behavior management program which teaches and reinforces acceptable behaviors, except where it is necessary to remove a student from a potentially dangerous situation or an unanticipated situation. So again, this language has been updated. And I'm not sure, Pastor AJ, if you'd like me to kind of just do an overview or go word by word through the policy.
How long is the policy?
Okay, there are 6 pages to the policy.
Well, you know, I think my perspective on, so the answer is yes, if we can go page by page, because I think behavior in schools is something that is very important. And I think that we all have to be aware of what our policy is to make sure it's equitable and, for all students, because behavior is something that teachers and staff deal with on a consistent basis. So I don't want to play with this.
Okay.
So I'd rather take the time. Let me ask my board members, Francois, Jahira, Tyrone, what are your sentiments on this? I know we have a short agenda and I know we're short on time, but I personally feel that behavior and how we do it is something that's important. What are y'all thoughts?
Pastor AJ, I agree. It deserves a full review and discussion. So we can take some time here and take some time outside of the meeting to go through it. My interest would be that it really begins to clarify for the staff, because it feels like in the district, folks are getting DCF acquisitions made and things like that. And so hopefully this kind of policy will really clarify to staff what they can and can't do to keep a student safe without concern that somehow they're triggering some other issue to come up. So let's take our time.
Okay, thank you. Jahira?
I 100% agree. Obviously, as you guys know, there's been a lot of behavioral issues in the past couple of weeks. So this is really important. I want to make sure also that we take our time with this, as not only does it impact our overall kids' well-being, but our staff and other kids' ability to learn in the school.
Okay, Francois, thumbs up, thumbs down? Well, all right. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. So, Dr. Silver, take your time. Take your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pastor AJ. So our next broad statements, our next 2 paragraphs are broad statements about the beliefs of the board. The Board of Education believes that maintaining an orderly, safe environment is conducive to learning and is an appropriate expectation of all staff members within the district. To the extent that staff actions comply with all applicable statutes and board policy governing the use of physical force, including physical restraint of students and seclusion of students, staff members will have the full support of the Board of Education in their efforts to maintain a safe environment. The board recognizes that there are times when it becomes necessary for staff to use reasonable restraint or place a student in seclusion as an emergency intervention to protect a student from harming himself or herself or to protect others from harm. Okay, if there are no revisions to those paragraphs, I'll move into definitions. And these definitions were provided by the CAVE model policy. And so we are bringing them into this policy to update this policy. Definition 1, life-threatening physical restraint means any physical restraint or hold of a person that restricts the flow of air into a person's lungs, whether by chest compression or any other means, or immobilizes or reduces the free movement of a person's arms, legs, or head while the person is in the prone position. Psychopharmacologic agent means any medication that affects the central nervous system, influencing thinking, emotion, or behavior. Physical restraint means any mechanical or personal restriction that immobilizes or reduces the free movement of a person's arms, legs, or head, including but not limited to carrying or forcibly moving a person from one location to another. Excluded from this definition is briefly holding a person in order to calm or comfort the person, restraint involving the minimum contact necessary to safely escort a person from one area to another, medical devices, including but not limited to supports prescribed by a healthcare provider to achieve proper body position or balance, helmets or other protective gear used to protect a person from injuries due to a fall, helmets, mitts, and similar devices used to prevent self-injury when the device is part of a documented treatment plan or individualized education program pursuant to Connecticut special education laws or prescribed or recommended by a medical professional and is the least restrictive means to prevent such self-injury or an exclusionary timeout. School employee means a teacher, substitute teacher, school administrator, superintendent, guidance counselor, school counselor, psychologist, social worker, nurse, physician, school paraprofessional, or coach employed by the Board of Education or working in a public elementary, middle, or high school, or any other individual who, in the performance of his or her duties, has regular contact with students and who provides services to or on behalf of students enrolled in the district's school pursuant to a contract with the Board of Education. Seclusion means the voluntary confinement of a student in a room from which the student is physically prevented from leaving. Seclusion does not include an exclusionary timeout. Student means a child, A, enrolled in grades kindergarten to 12 inclusive in a public school under the jurisdiction of a local or regional Board of Education. B, receiving special education and related services in an institution or facility operating under contract with a local or regional Board of Education. C, enrolled in a program or school administered by a regional education service center. Or D, receiving special education and related services from an approved private special education program, but shall not include any child receiving educational services from Unified School District Number 2 or the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. While this language with this definition is taken directly from CAVE, I believe that we should update it to pre-kindergarten, but I would ask for feedback from Ms. Hoffman and or Ms. Jackson, Trevor Jackson.
Mr. Jackson, you on?
Yes, I am, but I was going to let Ms. Hoffman answer this one. I've got others that are more, definitely related to me. Pre-K students do not have to be in school by law, and neither do actually kindergartners. That's, I guess, where probably Ms. Hoffman would go as well. So things, if we're going to, we may need to change this to, if students are enrolled in school, in kindergarten and up, then there are students, pre-K students, pre-K 3, 4, it's not a requirement to be enrolled at all. And they don't have to be in school, but once they're enrolled, they're considered our students. So but they can disenroll at any time up till the age of 7. They actually don't have to be in school and enrolled. So this is where we get into strangeness a little bit. Director Hoffman.
Yep, I would agree with that. Director Tremblay Jackson. Dr. Silver, we might need to just, I would say either double check with our pre-K special ed, well, somebody that oversees pre-K with special ed in the district, or we could also check with other districts to see if they include pre-K in their policy.
And it's not just pre-K special ed, it's all of pre-K. So it's
Pre-K,
probably
right.
UMATs and that, that group,
Mhm.
just to double check. But once they're with us, they're considered our students once they're enrolled. However, they don't have to be enrolled. So a parent can choose to disenroll them without any concern or penalty until age 7.
Thank you so much. The policy is to guide the behavior of adults in the school. So that is why I introduced the question, because adults will be working with our pre-K students. And so including pre-K students here would communicate to those serving pre-K students that they need to follow the policy as well.
I would agree with that. I think the only area where it gets cloudy for some folks, like I just taught CPI again for some of our employees, is when we have little ones falling asleep on the bus, on the way into school, and we have to pick them up to get them off the bus safely, and they're, really sleepy. Is that considered a restraint, or a hold because they had to pick them up to get them off the bus because they're asleep, and they can't leave. So those are the things that get, strange for the real little ones that are tired.
Okay, so we will check. Okay. Unless Ms. Mizrak has any guidance to offer us, any additional insight.
No, I think the comments make sense. I think Dr. Silva, you're right. This is to guide staff. So we just want to make sure that, it's in alignment with, what the law is. And, we're thinking about all of the little things like Ms. Tremblay Jackson mentioned that we probably didn't when we were drafting the amendments.
Thank you very much, all of you. I'm going to move on to the next definition, and I did make a note for that. Exclusionary.
Yeah, hold on. Hold on a second. Any comments or feedback from board members?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Johnson. Hey, quoting Ms. Jackson's comments, an area that we need to flag is the activities that are being excluded from that definition of physical restraint. I think, to me, I think it's clear in my mind that eventually you're going to have pre-K under the definition of student, and somehow you got to define what those young people are considered. But right now, exclusionary timeouts, the only thing that is being lifted out of physical restraint And it seemed like Ms. Jackson was saying you potentially may need an additional exclusion for pre-K children because you have to, out of necessity, pick them up for all manner of reasons that, you know, are beyond that of a typical student. So maybe in that other clause where you were defining physical restraint or something, you may need to put a flag there to put an exclusion in for pre-K students up there. Yeah, I think you need to put a flag to say for pre-K, we might need to put an additional exclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then we get into this strangeness though. See how it says, this is really pulled right out of the Connecticut statutes, right? And State Department of Education, where we're not able to carry or forcibly move a person from one location to another. However, I just described, like we have little ones that fall asleep on the school bus on the way into school. We can't just leave them on the school bus. And, you know, trying to wake them up is almost impossible. So we do end up picking them up to keep them safe, you know, and they kind of cuddle into the staff, but they're not, you know, they haven't done anything wrong other than fall asleep.
So hold on,
So-
Board Member Walker, let me ask a clarifying question. Just really, I don't want to cut you off, but I have to, like, has any staff member been accused of physically restraining a young person by picking them up and bringing them safely into the school?
No, not accused. What they're concerned about is needing to fill out a form, all right, a restraint form because of carrying a child, just to be on the safe side. So they would be doing that relatively pretty much almost every day for some young people, right? Even just to be on the safe side, when honestly, all they did was carry them because they fell asleep on the school bus and they needed to get them off the bus. You know, so that's, I think, a question not just for us, but, you know, across the state, recognizing that, you know, the real little ones sometimes fall asleep and are hard to rise. And, you know, it's not safe to have them walk when they're basically, you know, we've all had little children, I think,
Mhm, mhm.
you know.
Yeah, no, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and
Okay,
I
there you
made the
go.
mistake of putting my son down, and you know, the
They
kid
just kind of
falling out.
flop,
So I
right?
understand.
They just kind of flop because they're not
Yeah,
awake
yeah,
enough. All right. And so, you know,
Right.
on, you know, trying to be cautious with them. I mean, there was eventually my son got so big that I was like, okay, you know, I'm going to get hurt. So like, we'll just sit here until you're able to get yourself up enough to move, you know, but up until then, yeah, you know, you kind of carry them, you know, and they're progressive weight training. I'll grant you that, but still they're, so I think that's
All right.
a
I got what you're
hair,
saying.
it's a hair that we're going to have to figure out what to do with and how to make it right. But the law, the way it's written right now, would mean, technically speaking, that every time we pick up a child coming off the school bus to be on the safe side, we would have to do a restraint seclusion form, when in actuality, we weren't restraining or secluding, we were just carrying to be safe.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to take from
Yeah.
Tyrone, Board
right.
Member Walker's time. So good. I'm
No.
sorry about that.
No, I just wanted to capture it as a flag, put some language there. I think Ms. Jackson kind of spelled out exactly why. I was thinking of similar situations where at I call it the big school level, there are kindergartners who still have transition issues, you know, come into school for the first time. And there are situations where parents are delivering their young people to a school staff who are sometimes picking up the young person to get them, you know, into school and out of the separation from their parents, maybe for the first week, a month or something for school. And I've never heard anybody write in a form, but the way this is written, it creates a weird situation. So I think Ms. Jackson pointed out, let's clarify it so it becomes really clear. All right. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Any other feedback from board members? Okay. So I think let's head toward solution, because it seems as if we are it seems as if we are having two, like I guess not two issues, but in my mind it's two issues, right? When we have our little kindergarten folks, and then we also have policy for our bigger students, right? And so is there a way that we can define what we mean so staff do not have to fill out those forms, but to do a good deed and still be safe and cover ourselves? Dr. Silver?
Thank you so much, Pastor AJ. In the physical restraint definition, we do have the statement that reads, excluded from this definition is briefly holding a person in order to calm or comfort the person. Restraint involving the minimum contact necessary to safely escort a person from one area to another. So I believe that that language in the physical restraint definition would cover a situation such as lifting a child, waking a sleeping child on the school bus, and carrying them off the school bus. And also, you know, a situation where a child falls asleep and you need to move that child. And so I believe that language addresses that concern.
Ms. Jackson, Ms. Hoffman, does that satisfy? Because again, I don't want staff feeling like, 'cause I know what it. I've been a
That's where
director of staff.
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna be very honest that that's where people, get a little confused because of the previous line that says carrying or forcibly moving a person from one location to another, because we are carrying at that point. We're not just holding, like holding, like hugging or patting someone on the back or escorting them with one arm to like, come on, honey, let's go, let's go. Everybody's able to do that without having to do a restraint form. All right. There's no such thing, or, saying you're going to be okay, like that kind of thing doesn't mean you're filling out a form. However, it's where, because and so maybe we just need to do a parentheses or something to explain that for little ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why can't we just put like parentheses or something clarifying, excluding the little ones, something to that effect in that sentence, so there's no confusion.
Correct, because that's where the confusion
Right.
arises. So I think we could add something in there.
Yeah, let's do that, because unless there's something that says we can, but let's just be clear here. We don't need policies to be so convoluted, right? And complicated for our staff and people to figure out what they need. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. Dr. Silver, is there something that we?
Yes, sir. So I have added excluded from this definition. I also added a phrase at the end of that which says, which may include carrying a very young student. And we'll have our attorneys review that.
Yeah, we may have to define when, right? Like, when they're asleep on a school bus to safely get them off or things of that nature, because we don't want to be, you can't just carry a child from point A to point B because they're having, they're upset and having a tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
And young student, that's pretty vague, right? Young, what does that mean? I think we should be a little bit more specific in that. That's my opinion, but young student, like, I don't know. That's
right, because some people young would be 10 years old, and we're not
Right.
thinking, we're thinking more like pre-K, 3, 4, maybe, the 4 or 5-year-olds that are just entering kindergarten. That's it.
Right. So maybe we just specify that more.
Okay, so which may include carrying of students younger than 6 years of age. But we will have, that's the phrase that has been added, and we can certainly have council review the statutes to make sure that we could use a phrase like that in this without, to ensure that the policy still complies with the law and the statute. Oh, Ms. Darristell has a question.
Thank
Yes,
you.
you're recognized. Yep, good.
Thank you so much and good morning. One thing, I'm curious as to why we need to identify, or not so much identify, but point out a child younger than 6, or a student younger than 6, because once they're students, they're students. You know what I mean? And that's the first thing. The other question, or the other suggestion, with regards to the language and in moving a student, would be perhaps saying something like, moving a student when they are unable to move themselves, or, you know what I mean? Something like that, as opposed to giving examples of a student being upset or unsafe. Or you can even say when the student is unable to safely move themselves, because it could be anything. It could be, like you said, on the school bus, or if they fell asleep on the school bus, or if they were hurt on the playground, something like that.
Who's that question for?
So I can quickly say, I was the one who suggested being a little bit more specific in the young student, because young student can mean anything. It could be a 10-year-old, or 11-year-old, it depends on who's reading it and how they perceive that, right? So in my opinion, in order to avoid any confusion, I suggest being a little bit more specific.
Mhm.
The reason that I specific is good, but the reason that I wouldn't be as detailed with regards to the age of the student is because, there are people who assume that younger students are smaller, can be less aggressive, when there can be students who are rather, they may look like older students, or students in higher grades, and they can be extremely aggressive and extremely unsafe. So that's the only thing. My concern is people looking like, okay, why would you have to move a younger student? Because that's like opening up a door for more questions and more scrutiny, if you will.
Right, and if the student is being moved because they're not well, as in they're acting inappropriately and violently, then restraint seclusion law does apply. And we would have to do a restraint seclusion form. It's when a student, I think the conversation started because I brought up how people are somewhat confused when they're needing to pick up a child off a school bus that's very young and has fallen asleep to safely get them off the bus. Does that constitute a restraint because they're carrying a student? And according to the way physical restraint is defined here, it says carrying or forcibly moving a person from one location to another. And technically speaking, they're carrying, right? But it's not because the student was posing difficulty. It was just because they were asleep on the bus and needing to get them off safely.
Yeah. So for board member Francois, do you have any language that will help us move us forward? Because I don't want to stay here too long, but I also want to get this right. So what we have now is another which may include moving student who is unable to safely move themselves or carrying of students younger than 6 years of age.
Once again, the concern, and I hate to stay on this,
No, handle your business.
But the thing is, the student younger than 6 years of age. So then once again, it can open up the door. What about a student who's older than 6 years of age who fell asleep on the bus, and you're unable to you need to move them, and that student is extremely tiny or light, or light in weight, things like that. It's just when you put an age, it kind of it draws more attention to that specific age group, if you will. It brings a light to that specific age group, and it kind of there's more attention to that. is there a way that we can, let me see, well, I see excluded from the definition. Not include moving a child, like, because that's a different situation. That is not, I don't see that as a restraint. I mean, but that's just me with regards to moving a child who,
Right.
you know,
Right.
on the bus. And that's not even during, you know, that's not in the classroom. It's not, granted, you can move a child from, or restrain a child who is in the, you know, at recess or something like that. But it doesn't sound like, this sounds like a transportation issue, because if they're on the bus, that's still, isn't that considered part of transportation? I'm just curious. Because technically if this is like, say this is on the way to school and you need to move the student off the school bus because they fell asleep, that's before they have, attendance hasn't even been taken, if I'm not mistaken. So they're actually not present. And the same as, you know, dismissal, if they fell asleep on the school bus, and they, you know, they need to be, you know, removed from the school, you know, carried off the school bus, the school day is over, unless the school bus part would, I think would be relevant if perhaps this was on a field trip. That's the only time that I would see that this would apply, because that's during the school hours where the student is actually present, like they're in, you know, Power School, or the whatever attendance, you know, the way attendance is taken. But if they're on the school bus and it's at arrival and they haven't been, you know, checked off as present, I would see that still as a transportation issue.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Silver, that kind of is out of our lane, but is that, would you consider that an accurate statement?
Thank you so much. I actually would like Ms. Mizrak to give us guidance on when the school district is responsible for the child, because I believe, because we provide transportation, that we are responsible for the children who are on the transportation that we are providing. So even if attendance hasn't been taken yet, because we have assumed responsibility once we take the child from the care of the adult, the caregiver, and place them in our care, they are our responsibility.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dr. Silver. It's just a comment. You know, I think that the language, the way it's already written, you know, it's defining what physical restraint, which does include carrying, right, or forcibly moving a person from one location to another. But then it says excluding from that definition of physical restraint would involve, right, you know, whatever restraint, which could involve carrying, that would be the minimum contact necessary to safely escort a person from one person to another. I agree with Dr. Silver that I think the situation that we're talking about here is covered. Maybe the concern is over that word escort in that second section there. Excluded from this definition is briefly holding a person in order to calm or comfort the person, or state involving the minimum contact necessary to safely escort, which could include carrying, right? Maybe if we put in parentheses there that, you know, we're talking about potentially a situation where we're carrying a person, a young child.
That will get us, that's going to go against when you talk about when a state has talked to us about what they mean for escorting somebody and physical, you know, touch necessary to escort. It doesn't mean carrying or holding. All right. It means, you know, just putting your hand maybe like around somebody's back, you know, by the shoulders going, come on, or briefly holding someone's hand and saying, please come, or, you know, potentially arm in arm, one arm, you know, and saying, let's go, but not actually holding someone. Once you start holding someone where they can't leave you, all right, now we're into restraint.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess the other thing too is like when we pass a policy like this, do we do we have like other guidance in the form of a guideline or practice that we share with staff? You know what I mean? Because you're right. I mean, this language, you know, it can be confusing, but I mean, I think it is excluding the situation we're talking about, but perhaps we need to further amplify with our staff when we're going through a policy like this to say, look, guys, this is what the guideline for it is this. I mean, we're not talking about a situation where, you know, you'd have to pick up a young child off of the school
Right.
bus that fell asleep.
Right.
Because the policy is what it is, but we all know that the practice sometimes, you know, in implementing the policy, you know, is sort of a different issue sometimes. Because I think the one concern that we may have is sometimes it is better to keep the policy more broad and, you know, and not try to narrow it down. So then we are,
Right.
you know, I think as you've mentioned, Francois, you know, opening another area, well, what do we not mean this, but do we mean something else? You know, it can get confusing. But so I think we got to look at this section a little more to try to figure out the best language.
Okay. Well, listen, let's go ahead, Francois. I apologize, but
No, it's okay. I was just saying that I agree. Like I don't want to rush it, but you don't want to leave room for any, you know, any loopholes and okay, well, this, so someone justifying why they, you know, moved a child or why they did something. And then, you know, we don't have the language, you know, right and exact. That's just my concern. I'd rather spend more time on it and get it, you know, have it be precise and, you know, good as opposed to, you know, moving past it.
yeah. Yeah, definitely understand. All right. So Dr. Silver, here's my recommendation. Let's put a flag here, but let's continue to move forward. And I just want to be clear, this is our first reading of this or second reading?
First reading,
First.
sir.
All right, cool. So let's keep moving forward, but let's put a strong flag here. I don't want to hold us up. I think the conversation is good, but I don't think we're wrong in any of this. And we want to support our staff and not have them filling out, you know, ridiculous, you know, giving them extra work to do when they're just trying to be helpful and be supportive. And I think that's satisfied in the statement that we have. But if a board member feels like we need to expand a little more, I'd rather take caution than move forward. So let's put a flag there and let's work on that, you know, outside of this meeting. I appreciate the dialogue on all of this. I really do. This is not bad conversation, nor have we wasted time because this is important. So continue.
Okay, thank you, Pastor AJ. Thank you, our board members. Ms. Jarostel Ledger has her hand up still.
Is that a new hand?
Sorry about that. I just lowered it.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
That was
Thank you.
Ruby.
Thank you. So there's a flag here. We'll have council review to ensure correct language. And one of the nice things about using the model policies from CAVE is that they have all been reviewed by council and do align with both the statutes, the legislation, and the operationalization of them in school. So, excuse me. So we did stop with, I think, the definition of student, and we have a flag here to follow up with council to see if we should include pre-K. And I will move on to the next definition, which is exclusionary time out. Means a temporary, continuously monitored separation of a student from an ongoing activity in a non-locked setting for the purpose of calming such student or de-escalating such student's behavior. Excuse me. If there are no questions, I will move on to conditions pertaining to the use of physical restraint and or seclusion.
Yes, move forward.
Okay. Point A, school employees shall not use a life-threatening physical restraint on a student under any circumstance. Excuse me. Point B, if any instance of physical restraint or seclusion of a student exceeds 15 minutes, an administrator or his or her designee or a school health or mental health personnel or a board certified behavior analyst who has received training in the use of physical restraint and seclusion shall determine whether continued physical restraint or seclusion is necessary to prevent immediate or imminent injury to the student or to others. Upon a determination that such continued physical restraint or seclusion is necessary, such individual shall make a new determination every 30 minutes thereafter regarding whether such physical restraint or seclusion is necessary to prevent immediate or imminent injury to the student or to others. Excuse me. Going to move on to point C. No student shall be placed in seclusion unless.
Dr. Silver,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Silver, I'm gonna call a 2-minute recess, all right? 2-minute recess. Get some water, take your time. I'm calling a 2-minute recess,
Thank you.
all right? 2-minute recess. We'll convene in 2 minutes. All right, we are now going to reconvene. Again, as the chair, I do have the right to call a short recess. And Dr. Silver is carrying this meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that Dr. Silver is okay. She should not have to go through that. And so I'd rather take a moment. Dr. Silver, if you are comfortable, it's back into your hands.
Thank you so much, Pastor AJ. Yes, I'm ready to move on. I appreciate the water break. Definitely needed that. Conditions pertaining to the use of physical restraint and or seclusion. So we were on point C, no student shall be placed in seclusion unless, and there are a number of circumstances here that are highlighted. The use of seclusion is an emergency intervention to prevent immediate or imminent injury to the student or to others, provided the seclusion is not used for discipline or convenience and is not used as a substitute for a less restrictive alternative. C point B, such student is continually monitored by a school employee during the period of such student seclusion. Any student voluntarily or involuntarily placed in seclusion or restrained shall be regularly evaluated by a school employee for indications of physical distress. The school employee conducting the evaluation shall enter each evaluation in the student's educational record. Monitor shall mean by direct observation or by observation using video monitoring within physical proximity sufficient to provide aid as may be required. Point C, the area in which such student is secluded is equipped with a window or other fixture allowing the student a clear line of sight beyond the area of seclusion. Point D, seclusion shall not be utilized as a planned intervention in a student's behavioral intervention plan, individualized education program, or plan pursuant to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended from time to time. So that was a lot. Just want to ask if there is any comment before I continue to read, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Yes,
sir.
Yeah. And I'm gonna almost apologize because I realize there's a lot, so I'll try to be quick. I've seen the use of restraint and seclusion, and trying to clarify then, how do we, is seclusion somehow different than like in-school suspension? I know that's not quite on the table here, but most of the times, you know, you're trying to separate a young person from some activity. I'm thinking about breaking up a fight or something very dangerous is going on, and you're separating the child. What's the difference between that separation and seclusion? Because that's all. There's some clarification there. The other thing is, every time a child, every time a fight is broken up or some altercation and two children are separated, is there some reporting that has to go home to parents? Because it seems like every physical restraint requires some kind of reporting, and it seems like you can't use seclusion. So I guess I'm trying to come up with a real question. Are we going to have some, I hate to say it, exclusion to a seclusion policy where in-school suspension is allowed, or sitting in a timeout is allowed, or some other types of activities where a child is clearly separated from their classmates, or no? So I'll leave it there because that's my only point. I want to understand how this is going to workably work in a school setting, if that's clear.
Yes.
I'm giving it to Dr. Silva, but it could also go to Ms. Jackson or Ms. Hoffman if they have some expertise to offer to this. It's just not clear exactly how this works.
We got you. Who wants to satisfy this question? By all means, just hop right in, because I see hands, but I'm not sure if these are hands for question or hands for comment. So.
No, I was going to try and respond if you want me to. All right. So this exclusionary timeout and is explained in here, and so is seclusion. So when we're pulling somebody away from a fight, we've restrained them. So right there, we have a restraint form that we need to complete. It's allowed, it's in order to keep the person safe for the safety of themselves or others. So that's one of the reasons why we might do a restraint. So we would do a restraint form. It's not a cumbersome form, by the way, but one needs to justify why we put our hands on someone and had to pull them away forcibly. So, and that form preferably is given to, not only is their phone call made home, but the form itself is given to the parent at the end of that same school day, rather than waiting the full 24 hours. Technically speaking, somebody has 24 hours to complete the form and get it home, but we strongly support and suggest every time we do these reviews with everybody that the form, think of yourself as a parent, should be given right at the end of that school day and not wait the full 24 hours. And most people can relate to that. And so it hasn't been an issue for the most part. Then it is different than suspension, because suspension, a child can walk out of suspension. It's not a guarded room, shall we say. So inside suspension, young people could walk out. In seclusion, we basically, security or a BT or somebody that's, you know, been trained would stand in the way of leaving the room, would, you know, try and help a child stay in the room for their safety and the safety of others.
Oh, okay. That's an important clarification. Okay. Thank you. That I get.
All right, I saw another hand. Francois, did you have a hand up, board member Francois?
Thank you so much. I did have my hand up, but I did put it down because I just wanted to, you know, just clarify once again, well, not once again, but just clarify that, you know, seclusion and inside suspension are two totally different things, and timeout, if you will. Like they're very different. But she, you know, she explained it, so I'm gonna go back on mute.
Okay, appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right, Dr. Silver, I think we're ready to move forward. And I will say at 10 o'clock, we will conclude this meeting and we will come back. I'll get with Christina to see if we can schedule like a special meeting before our board meeting to you know, to continue draw this particular subject out. But at 10 o'clock, I don't want to push anybody past 10. So we can continue with this and just at 9:56, 9:57, we're going to go ahead and conclude. So go ahead, Dr. Silver. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor AJ. And I know this is complex, and I'm really glad that we have team members here who specialize in this work so they can inform us and the language that we're using. Point D, school employees may not use a psychopharmacologic agent on a student without that student's consent, except as an emergency intervention to prevent immediate or imminent injury to the student or others, or as an integral part of the student's established medical or behavior support or educational plan, as developed consistent with section 17A-543 of the Connecticut General Statutes, or if no such plan has been developed as part of a licensed practitioner's initial orders. The use of psychopharmacologic agents alone or in combination may be used only in doses that are therapeutically appropriate and not as a substitute for other appropriate treatment. And I'm wondering with this, Ms. Hoffman or Ms. Tremblay Jackson, could you provide us with what is a psychopharmacologic agent? What is a common one that's used, might be prescribed to a child?
We don't do PRNs or, you know, as needed in the school system. So we only do anything that's been prescribed where a student has to take it per their physician and a given time frame. And, you know, we do have some students that are on anti-anxiety medications, things of that nature, but, you know, those are given through the nurse. And we would never use any pharmacological agent to calm a student as a PRN, for lack, you know, which is the language that physicians use, meaning as needed. So we don't ever administer because somebody's upset. Does that make sense? All right. So, you know, it's administered sometimes because we do have children that are on pharmacological agents because of their mental health issues, or so it might be high anxiety, it might be due to depression, it might be because children often have agitated depression, it might be because of a psychological issue that was similar to schizophrenia. Anyway, whenever they have anything of that nature, it is given as as prescribed, and usually at home. Occasionally somebody has a dose that needs to be given like midday, in which case it's done with a special permission form signed by the physician and the parent and only given by the nurse. So I'm not sure this would ever apply to us, just to be clear.
Okay, appreciate that. Ms. Hoffman?
I just wanted to, yeah, I want to just agree with Joanne, but also add that that would most likely happen in an approved private setting. And that's why it's included in this language. Like Joanne saying, we would not provide a PRN in our schools.
Okay. That's, I think that's clear. Any other questions regarding this? Okay, let's continue to push forward.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see Francois's hand. I just saw that late.
Yes, sorry. Thank you so much. I just have one question pertaining to the PRN issue. Is Benadryl or Claritin, something like that, even if it's for allergies, and say if a student may be having an allergic reaction or something like that, we just need to make sure that the medications that that the nurse is able to administer in the in the public schools does not have is not used as not mind altering, but something that would fall under that area of dealing with their mood or anything like that, because schools can administer Benadryl with a doctor's order, but Benadryl can make children tired and calm, but it's not used in the school for that. It's for allergies. So that's just, I think that language, we need to once again look at the language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
In response to Ms. Ledger's question, Ms. Darcel Ledger's question, the use of psychopharmacologic agents alone or in combination may be used only in doses that are therapeutically appropriate and not as a substitute for other appropriate treatment. So I believe that the statement here does cover the concern that a particular drug might be used, we are required to follow physician prescriptions and would not, would only follow the doctor's order. So I'm not sure if that would pertain to the school setting, because we would be following the doctor's order.
Okay.
I will go on to point E. In the event that physical restraint or seclusion is used on a student 4 or more times within 20 school days, an administrator, one or more of such students' teachers, the parent guardian of such student, and if any, a mental health professional shall convene for the purpose of conducting or revising a behavioral assessment of the student, creating or revising any applicable behavioral intervention plan, and determining whether such student may require special education. Point B, if such student is a child requiring special education or is a child being evaluated for eligibility for special education and awaiting a determination, such students' planning and placement team shall convene for the purpose of 1, conducting or revising a behavioral assessment of the student, and 2, creating or revising any applicable behavior intervention plan, including but not limited to such students' individualized education plan. Point F, the parent guardian of a student who is placed in physical restraint or seclusion shall be notified not later than 24 hours after the student is placed in physical restraint or seclusion. A reasonable effort shall be made to provide such notification immediately after such physical restraint or seclusion is initiated. I think Ms. Jackson Tremley, Director Jackson Tremley, noted earlier that we do send a notice home with parents on the day of the event, but we are required to meet that requirement within 24 hours. Point G, school employees shall not use a physical restraint on a student or place a student in seclusion unless he/she has received training on the proper means for performing such physical restraint or seclusion. Point H, the Board of Education and each institution or facility operating under contract with the board to provide special education for children, including any approved private special education program, shall record each instance of the use of physical restraint or seclusion on a student, specify whether the use of seclusion was in accordance with an individualized education program, specify the nature of the emergency that necessitated the use of such physical restraint or seclusion, and include such information in an annual compilation on its use of such restraint and seclusion of students. The board and institutions or facilities operating under the contract with the board to provide special education for children, including any approved private special education program, shall provide such annual compilation to the Department of Education in order to examine incidents of physical restraint and seclusion in school. Point J, any use of physical restraint or seclusion on a student shall be documented in the student's educational record. The documentation shall include A, the nature of the emergency and what other steps, including attempts at verbal de-escalation, were taken to prevent the emergency from arising if there were indications that such an emergency was likely to arise. And B, a detailed description of the nature of the restraint or seclusion, the duration of such restraint or seclusion, and the effect of such restraint or seclusion on the student's established educational plan. And point K, any incident of the use of restraint or seclusion that results in physical injury to a student shall be reported to the State Board of Education.
Yeah, I got a question about that. And my question is more around context and the practical use of this, right? So I guess the spirit of what I'm saying is, for example, you have a student who's not a bad student. You know, we're talking about a whole year, academic year. This student may get, get in a physical altercation twice, right? And this will be documented in their file, right? And then on the other extreme, you have a student who continually does this, 10 times out of the academic year. How do we in this policy see these two individuals different? Or, how do we not let this travel with a student who this is just a minimal thing that happens once or twice a year, having a bad day, stuff going on at home, comes to school, doesn't know how to handle their emotions, gets into an altercation, someone gets hurt. By all means, it's wrong, right? And we all know it's wrong. But the circumstances may present something different. But then on the other hand, you have a student who, they just like this. They come to school every day looking for something. How do we not see those two? And maybe someone else can hear what I'm saying and say it a little differently. But how do we? I get very nervous when we say we're going to track incidents. I 100% understand if other people are involved and people are hurt and things like that, but how do we not create a path of failure in this particular policy as it's read? My second one is number K. Why is this not given to the local Board of Education, but directly reported to the State Board of Education? Those are my two kind of questions.
I think Ms. Hoffman can respond to that.
So I can respond to the first part of the comment. I think we're talking about two different things. One is a possible physical altercation, like a fight, that becomes a behavioral incident. And the policy is focused on a physical restraint, and the documentation then required by the state to inform the parent, but also report to the state. So it might sound the same, but we're talking about two different incidents. So the behavioral incident that may be the result of a fight is documented at the school level and may have a consequence at the school level.
Mhm.
The physical restraint is handled in a different way, and we do have to report. We have an annual report we have to provide to the state anytime we have a physical restraint. But I hear what you're saying about an isolated incident and how we handle that, and an ongoing concern, which requires physical intervention.
Yeah, you know, and again, I'm not trying to jump down to details, and I appreciate that clarity. Let me see what time is it. All right, so 9:51. Here's what I want to do. I would like to come back to this and our other agenda items at another time. And so don't think Christina is still on. I wouldn't expect her to still be on. If she's still on, she's a trooper for doing this on her vacation. Christina, are you still on?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So, and I appreciate you for still being on, because you certainly don't have to be. What I would like to do is schedule another meeting to go through, well, maybe it might be another 2 meetings, right? I think we need to spend an entire, how many more pages of this, Dr. Silver, do we have on this particular item?
So we are on page 4 of 6.
4 of 6?
But yeah, but actually the 6th page is
It's
the
definitions.
it's the legal reference for the most part. So we have one more page of this, but we also have another policy that's very similar to this that people may have a lot of questions about.
Yeah. All right. So what I would like to do, Christina, is I want to take these two now. Oh, let me just, before I say that, how many more do we have on our agenda for this meeting? Really
Just the public comment discussion.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So, all right, cool. So what we can do is let's schedule another meeting for these 2 items. And let's schedule it for, it sounds like we're going to need like an hour and a half to discuss this. So if we can find a time before our next board meeting for another hour and a half, just to really go through this and prepare it for the board meeting for the kind of the first reading. And then we can come back to it in our next board meeting and just solidify what we said in the second meeting. Because I really want to take my time with this. I don't think this is a policy that we can play with. I think we really need to take our time with it. As you know, our school system does see and interact with altercations and behaviors quite frequently, and that's not a secret. So it's not like we're trying to hide that. But as chair of the policy committee, I want to get this right, because I want to make sure our staff is clear on what their responsibilities are, and our students understand what this is, but also be equitable in how we do this. So in our next meeting, I would like to see those folks that are directly impacted by this policy. So I would like to see a CSO on the line. I don't know who the chair or the president of or whoever. I would like to see a CSO, a representative of the CSOs on the line. I also would like to see a representative of the behavior techs, because I believe these folks are probably going to interact with this policy, quite frankly, more often than not. Is that an accurate assessment? Ms. Jack, I can't hear you. Your phone, something's happening. I see you talking.
Can
but
you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Right, they're part of the crisis teams at the schools. The crisis teams at the schools, that's further into the policy and defined. All right, and I train the crisis teams in CPI, crisis prevention and intervention, and I also train security in crisis prevention and intervention. If you wanted to have the chief join us for security, that would be great. But BTs, I'm not sure there's a lead that could assist us more. They're involved with us in training, and they have to have CPI training. So how to de-escalate a situation rather than intervene physically, if at all possible. What constitutes a situation where you have to, versus, if it's just property damage, how can you take away an audience? How can you de-escalate the situation and not resort to restraint or seclusion? That is basically the focus of CPI. So I'm one of the instructors and the trainers and coordinate the CPI for the district. And every school has to have a crisis team, and the crisis team members, BTs, by the way, have to be CPI trained to be on the job. All right, now we had a little bit of snafus for new hires last year because of COVID, but we're catching them all up right this second as we speak. Because last week I just did a training and there's another one coming up shortly. But that is the whole reasoning, really, for RBTs. So they interact with this, but they can't change what's expected from the state. If they have to abide by what's expected from the state.
Understood. And I appreciate that clarity, and I appreciate what you do to make sure that we're in compliance. The spirit of me saying this is I want to make sure we hear from all sides on what this looks like. So I appreciate you being here, but if there's other perspectives that's going to interact intimately with this policy, I really would like them to have them at the table. Ms. Jackson, I'm sure you're enough, and you have brought a perspective into this committee that I appreciate, because I want to make sure, again, that our staff members are being heard in an effective way, so we don't run into these small SAFU, that divert from the quality of education that we can bring. So our next meeting, I just would like to bring those who will be intimately working with this particular policy, just so they're at the table and they can be heard. And again, we get it right. Tyrone, Board Member Walker, go ahead. You can have the comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I agree with what Pastor AJ Johnson is saying. What I would say is that we may need a longer timeline. I think, Ms. Jackson, I am agreeing with you that you guys are setting up the compliance regime, and so I'm not expecting the behavior tech to modify what we need to comply with. But because we're looking at policy, I think there's an opportunity to hear from frontline people as to what works and doesn't work in their actual environment. And maybe beyond this first reading, because we're looking at the policy, they may have some voice between them and that supervision to say, hey, if you're modifying physical restraint policy, here's an idea, an issue, a concern that we have that we'd like to see reflected in policy. And so since the brain trust is here, there may be an opportunity to put a fix in the policy to address some longstanding issue beyond compliance, just to make it more workable. But that may actually take a little more time. So I don't know, Chairman, Johnson, if, we may need more than, we may need time between the first reading and the second reading. I don't know, but there may be the need for a second or third meeting to get all of that accomplished. Because based on that feedback, the folks here, Ms. Jackson and Dr. Silva, may need to put a fix into the policy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no doubt. It makes sense. I'm just trying to keep the trains running on time. And so if we can do as much as we can in the next meeting and then make that decision, which you're probably right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I actually think you're right. But I don't want to scare people with too many meetings. So let's just say, let's take that up
Okay.
in the next meeting, and if we can't come to where we need to be, then we'll extend the timeline. But let's try to get another meeting with substantial time to
Okay.
see how far we get. And if we don't get it there, believe me, I don't mind pulling it back.
Okay.
The only thing I'm unsure about is are there any time, are we running into any deadlines regarding this policy for this school year? Or anything that is critical to this?
Sorry, if I may, yes, I will schedule that meeting as you requested, but also a reminder that this is a first reading. So even if we bring it for first reading, still have a whole nother month before we can even adopt it as a policy. So there is time for more meetings after even the regular meeting.
That's exactly it. We have it that additional month.
Okay, cool. Very good. Dr. Silver?
Thank you so much, Pastor AJ. I do want to recognize that the last time this policy was revised was in 2005. So in addition to our very thoughtful board members, because it is such an old policy and does require so much updating, it's understandable that we need to spend a little bit more time on it, and appreciate your attention to the details of this policy.
No, no doubt, no doubt. The minute I saw this come up, this is something that, we want to get right. And also, Lori, from your purview, coming to the meeting or in between, if there are any, you really defend our system, right? If there are any lawsuits or anything that we have been dinged with, with this policy, that history would be helpful as well, because I know a lot of people getting these things, and some may go get lawyers and beat up on our policy, and so I just want to, when we come back together, if you could kind of bring that information of what you've seen or what has been put forward in terms of behavior policy, and just on that level. Okay, all right, it's 9:59. I didn't expect it to be this way, but it definitely has been this way. But I want to thank you for your time and your consideration. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I look forward to seeing you all again as we explore this policy. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful and sparkling day.